I knew it. It just made sense. Vitamin D is going to help you out on the ketogenic diet. Ketogenic diet's high in fat. Vitamin D absorbs well with fat. It just made sense. But now there's evidence. Let's talk about it. So yes, in general, vitamin D is associated with fat. The ketogenic diet is higher in fat. So it makes sense that there's going to be some synergy there. But I really wanted to dive into the more biochemical level and see how is it helping us? How can it help us get deeper into ketosis or help us get fat adapted? So let's break it all down. Speaking of keto, after this video, I want you to check out my friends over at Superfat. They have some epic pancake mix. They have a bunch of different things. They have cookies, they have nut butters, they have all kinds of delicious things which you can totally check out. But I went ahead and I put a link down below for you to check out their pancake mix. Because if you're doing keto and you just want to have something, I don't know, a little bit more normal for lack of a better term, you've got to try it. So there's a special link with a very special discount just for people that watch my channel. This is something that you really should just try if you want to have some fun. It's something to have, I don't know, just keto relaxation on a Saturday or Sunday morning. So anyhow, check them out. Special link, special pricing only for viewers of this channel. Please don't share it outside of this, down below in the description. So first off, there are some reasons why you might want to have vitamin D outside of just performance or improving keto. You see, there was a study that was published in Epilepsy Research. Now, this study looked at pediatric patients, okay? So it's a little bit of a different ballgame. It looked at children, and it found that pediatric ketogenic diet patients had a little bit of a loss of bone density. That's not really a good thing. That scares us a little bit, but hear me out on it, okay? You see, what happens is ketones are a tad more acidic, okay? So what happens is your body has to maintain acid-base balance, okay? It has to do that. That's probably the most fundamental thing. That is the foundation, the environment for your body, and if it goes outside of that acid-base range, then we have a problem. So it notices that ketones are making it more acidic, so it pulls minerals from the bones to neutralize it and make it less acidic. Well, that might make you think, well, shoot, I don't even want to do the ketogenic diet. But hear me out. It's really only applying to kids. The next study was published in Child Neurology, and this found that maybe the reason for this was that high ketones, very high ketones, seemed to interfere with the conversion of vitamin D2 and D25 into the bioactive, the bioavailable form, vitamin D3. So this is kind of intriguing, but then when you look over at adults, it doesn't apply. You see, there was a study that demonstrated that obesity was correlated with low vitamin D levels. And as subjects lost weight, vitamin D levels would go up, just independent of whatever diet they were doing. As a matter of fact, there was a study that was published in PLOS Medicine that found that obesity is the leading cause of vitamin D deficiency. So if you're on a ketogenic diet to lose weight and change body composition, there's a good chance you're going to naturally improve your vitamin D levels as is. So I don't think we really have to worry about the bone density thing, but still, let's touch on that just a little bit more before we get into how vitamin D will help you get more out of keto. There was a really cool study published in the journal Molecules. Okay, it took a look at 56 individuals and divided them into two groups. One group went into a Mediterranean diet, a standard Mediterranean. Another group went into a very low calorie ketogenic diet. Okay, now both groups after 12 months had pretty significant improvements in their vitamin D levels, but the ketogenic group had a significant increase. Their vitamin D levels went from 18.4 nanograms per milliliter all the way up to 29.3 nanograms per milliliter. That is seriously a lot. Compare that to the Mediterranean. Okay, they went up significantly too, but not nearly as much. They found with the ketogenic diet, for every kilogram of weight lost, they ended up improving their vitamin D levels by about 0.39 nanograms per milliliter. Compare that to Mediterranean, which was about 0.13. The cool thing is, my brain immediately goes to, okay, let's do a Mediterranean version of the keto diet, and then maybe we get the best of both worlds. Anyhow, I digress. Then we jump over into the whole vitamin D thing with fat. Okay, there are multiple studies, but one in particular that shows that vitamin D levels are much better associated with fat. 30% more increase in vitamin D absorption when consumed with high-fat meals. Okay, so that means even if you weren't paying attention to anything else, just by going on the ketogenic diet, if you are actually consuming vitamin D-rich foods, you're going to improve your levels by up to 30%. That's significant. But now let's talk performance. Let's talk getting out of this, getting something out of this. Okay, the whole goal of the ketogenic diet isn't to change your body. I mean, maybe it is indirectly, but really what you're after is changing how your body uses fuel. It's called fat adaptation. We want our cells to become ruthlessly efficient at using fat for fuel, not spoiled on glucose. So that's called fat adaptation, and it starts with something called PPAR. So I'm just gonna call it the master switch. The PPAR master switch is what flips and allows the cell to start using fat. Well, guess what? There was a study published in the journal Nutrition that showed that vitamin D directly activates PPAR, just the same way as ketones do. So when you're in ketosis, you're activating PPAR and getting yourself fat adapted. When you take vitamin D, you're activating PPAR and getting yourself fat adapted. We're working along the same pathway, meaning you might be able to literally get fat adapted faster. What's interesting is that vitamin D is not necessarily likely to help you lose weight. It's kind of funny because vitamin D levels go up in people that are losing weight, which implies that, oh, vitamin D should make me lose weight. Well, correlation does not equal causation. You see, what ends up happening is vitamin D gets stored in our adipose tissue, okay? So as we lose weight, we release the vitamin D into our bloodstream, so the vitamin D levels go up. But there's no real situation where taking in vitamin D immediately helps you burn fat, but it does condition the cells to know how to use fat, so that when you go to work and do your cardio, you do your workouts, you put yourself in a deficit, you are much more likely to utilize that fat. You still have to do the work. It just sort of primes the pump for you. Additionally, vitamin D helps our insulin levels and our glucose levels fall quite a bit lower, which allows you to get fat adapted. You can't get fat adapted until your insulin levels are just hanging out at a relatively low level for most of the time, So when that happens, fat adaptation. But now let's talk something really cool. We all are looking for longevity and health span, getting the most out of our lives for as long as we possibly can, okay? Well, there's something at play called a SIRTUIN. And a SIRTUIN is, well, think of it again as sort of a master switch for longevity. It's the job of SIRTUINs to go and activate all kinds of things that help us live a better life, keep us, well, for lack of a better term, a little bit younger, okay? So this is important, and when you look at how this works, you find that, okay, the ketogenic diet leaves more sirtuin activators available. That's all it comes down to. Basically, less energy is spent metabolizing glucose, and more energy can be spent on repairing the bridges and tunnels and roads within your body, i.e. healthy aging. What's interesting is that there was a study published in the journal Nutrients that found that muscle cells that had a higher amount of fat in them, basically fatty cells, well, they had a significant increase in oxidative damage, which definitely affects aging. Well, they found that vitamin D seems to reverse that negative effect on the cell. It reverses that mitochondrial damage, allowing that cell to be able to function better. The same similar pathway that ketones do. So again, vitamin D and ketones seem to really be working in a very similar way to affect how our cells function. Additionally, vitamin D activates what's called PGC1A. Okay, that's a complicated term once again, but PGC1A is like a regulator for what's called mitochondrial biogenesis. So if you imagine PGC1A is like a foreman that builds lots of energy powerhouses. If you have more PGC1A, more foremans, you have more power plants being built, and you have more energy. Who doesn't want more energy as they get a little bit older, right? It's a very important thing. Okay, then the other piece we have to talk about is the inflammatory response. Okay, it's relatively known that once you're in ketosis for a while and your ketone levels are elevated, that you end up having a blunted inflammatory response, meaning you potentially modulate inflammation via what's called the NLRP3 inflammasome. So you modulate that, thereby potentially reducing inflammation. It turns out that vitamin D works along the same pathway. You see, they found in a particular study that it decreased interleukin-1 beta after lipopolysaccharide release. So that means that when exposed to a pathogen, the body had an inflammatory response. But when vitamin D was added into the equation, well, there wasn't as much of an inflammatory response. What does this have to do with healthy aging? What does this have to do with weight loss? Well, inflammation is like the root of so much of that. Aging has to do with that, right? So when we look at the big picture, that's a very, very important piece. So vitamin D works along these same biochemical and even hormonal pathways, which makes it quite fascinating, okay? Now you might be wondering really quick here at the end, okay, so if weight loss is associated with my vitamin D levels going up, what if I'm not trying to lose weight on keto? What if I'm actually happy with my weight? Is it gonna affect my acid base to the point where like I actually become more acidic? There was a study that showed that when you took lean athletes and put them on a ketogenic diet for 3.5 weeks, that they actually did have a decrease in bone density. However, it was only 3.5 weeks and it didn't give it enough time to actually take account of the inflammatory response. So when you look at longer term studies, you see that doesn't necessarily have the same issue. So the point is as long as you are eating your vitamin D rich foods, you probably won't have an issue. Okay, athletes become victim to bone density issues in a lot of different ways because they disrupt their acid base anyway. But the mere nature of being an athlete also allows you to put compression on your bones, which improves density. But anyhow, as always, keep it locked in here on my channel, and I'll see you tomorrow.